So hey guys, what if Naruto control over She-Hulk? Let's start the series. You still in bed, Hinata-chan? Kiba asked as she walked into the hotel room carrying a shopping bag in each hand. What happened to just taking a quick little nap? Hinata sighed as Kiba closed the door behind her. Guess I needed more sleep than I thought. How'd the shopping go? Pretty good. I got some new stuff for all three of us. A new sweatshirt and a couple new bras for you. Some t-shirts and jeans for Akamaru. And some more skin-tight jeans and low-cut tops for me. That last remark had Hinata sighing again. Kiba-chan, you know I'm okay with you wearing whatever you want, but I've gotta know what the deal is with you and all the skimpy outfits you're wearing. With how cold it is out there, I'd expect you to go in the opposite direction. Kiba shrugged, set her bags down, and walked over to the bed, promptly jumping in so she could lay next to Hinata. She cuddled up to her friend and confided in her. I've got sweatshirts and nice long coats for when I need them, but I want to show off my figure whenever I can. I'm gonna grow my hair out longer too, and you're gonna help me find the makeup that'll knock people out of their socks. Okay, but why? Because I've never gotten to dress like a girl before, Kiba answered. Looking down at her new ensemble, she turned her gaze back to Hinata and said, back in the hidden leaf. I was terrified every time somebody gave me a sideways glance. I'm finally free from that. And I don't want to waste it dressing like I did before. Hinata shook her head, but smiled and patted Kiba on her head nonetheless. Alright, I won't fight you on this. If it makes you happy, it makes me happy too. A nice big bear hug would be Hinata's reward for her kind answer. Kiba squeezed her wife so hard that it was a challenge for her to breathe. That's why I love you, Hinata-chan. Well, that and the fact that you're gonna come with me to the mall tomorrow. I am? Kiba let her go and said, yep, you, me and Akamaru are gonna get the last bits of clothes we need before we leave to start searching for Naruto. Good idea, Hinata replied. I want to bring my A game the first time I see him again. Based on the way Hinata's face went full on crimson, Kiba had a feeling she hadn't meant to say that last part out loud. You've really got a one-track mind sometimes, Hinata-chan. Hinata couldn't help but explain herself. That's not what I meant. Do I still have feelings for Naruto-kun? Of course I do. But this about me wanting to look strong and confident in front of him. Like I said back in the hidden leaf, this is the guy whose confidence made me feel like I could really accomplish something one day. His first impression is important to me. I believe you, Kiba told her, then added with a smirk. But I also believe if he gave you the chance, you'd fuck him the second you could, no matter what the situation might be. The way I've been feeling lately, you might be right. Those writer side effects the book talked about are starting to kick in. There was no need for Kiba to ask what side effects Hinata was referring to. She'd read the book. Mephisto had left them just as extensively as Hinata had, and intended to do anything she could help her friend through the, interesting set of drawbacks that came with being a ghost writer. But that was a bridge they could worry about when they actually reached it. Kiba had already decided there were bigger fish to fry. We'll get all figured out one way or another. In the meantime, I think we should find a place to train after we go shopping tomorrow, so that we can make sure we're familiar with our powers before we risk getting caught up in whatever's waiting for us out there. Agreed, Hinata said. Her mind drifted to the last of their companions, the one who'd gotten his own room but still needed to be checked up on every hour simply to make sure he wasn't getting into any trouble. He was new not only to this new world, but to being human as well. Couldn't hurt to go over a couple of things with Akamaru too. We haven't had him out in public yet. Kiba hadn't thought of that. He's been adjusting pretty quickly, I think. There might be a couple of habits we need to help him break, but he was already smarter than your average dog. I don't think he'll make a scene or anything. That may have been the case, but Hinata wanted to be sure. We're trying to lay low here, Kiba-chan. Akamaru humping somebody's leg might blow that plan a bit. Bit of an exaggeration, Kiba grumbled. But I see your point. We'll make sure it gets done. Good. Once we get all of that taken care of, it's off to find Naruto-kun. I'm hoping he'll shed a little more light on what the hell we've gotten ourselves into with Mephisto. The name alone was enough to make Kiba growl. I really don't trust that guy. He's got a nasty endgame coming. I just don't know what it is yet. Hinata had that same sinking feeling, combined with the guilt that she was the reason they were even there to begin with. That guilt wouldn't get her anywhere on its own though. The only way she could use it was as a launch pad for something that could. She was determined to make sure she, Kiba, and Akamaru all made a difference in this world, no matter what happened. Hinata was going to make her choice mean something. If Mephisto didn't like that, Then he'd better be ready to get the hell out of Hinata's way. We'll deal with Mephisto when the time's right. For now, we'll play along, find Naruto, and get everything straightened out on our end. After that, we start doing things our way. You know you're really sexy when you talk like that. Sweat dropped from Hinata's forehead. Couldn't let me have that one, could you? Someone's gotta keep you humble. Hinata couldn't help but laugh. Moment like this really made her grateful Kiba was going on this journey with her. As long as she had people like this walking beside her, Hinata felt as though she could handle anything Mephisto might throw at her. Speaking of the demented demon, Mephisto currently found himself in the exact sort of situation Hinata would expect, walking through a room filled with bloody corpses. Said room was an empty crack den on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, and there were roughly half a dozen dead junkies in total. Based on the marks covering their body, the attack had been a frenzied one. Probably a drug deal that had gone bad. Only one person stood out among the crowd, and that was the man who died of a gunshot wound. He held a knife in his hand, and across from him was a man with a revolver in his hand. Mephisto had seen enough scenes like this to piece together what had happened. Got cocky, didn't you, son? Word of advice. Always go for something vital when you use a knife, otherwise, some punk with a gun might have enough strength left to finish you. Looks like you found that out the hard way. Mephisto heard a small grumble from the other side of the room. He wasn't alone in there. But then he already knew that. It was the presence of the man with the black hair, goatee, and red cape that made him come there in the first place, the one and only Dr. Strange was who he'd come to see. But seemed the good doctor wasn't too happy to see him. Standing in the corner with his arms folded over his chest, Strange asked, "What are you doing here, Mephisto?" "Same thing you're doing here, I suspect," Mephisto replied, ignoring the venom in Strange's voice. The demon lord waved his hand in the direction of gunshot victim, making the knife stir in the dead man's hand. It flew from his lifeless grip and over to Mephisto. Mephisto held it in his hand for a couple of seconds before tossing it into the air. He created the same fiery rings he had with the wrecker's crowbar, and used them to strip away the facade that this was a normal knife. Underneath was the same otherworldly purple substance the crowbar from before had been made from. With his point made, Mephisto let the knife fall to the ground and said, "Dormammu's back. He never really leaves, just finds new ways to cause trouble for our world." "On that, you and I can agree," Mephisto said, taking in all of the carnage around him. "You know that bastard wouldn't try something this bold unless he has something big in mind. My question for you, oh great Sorcerer Supreme, is what exactly that might be." Strange didn't appreciate the sarcasm, or Mephisto presence in general. "Nothing that concerns you. There's never been a situation where your presence is a good thing. Depends on your perspective." This was the last thing in the world Strange had time for. "Okay, unless you've got something useful for me, why don't you go ahead and leave?" Mephisto looked Strange up and down, doing his best to read the ever-stoic man. "You sure you want to close the door on me? There aren't many other people who could help track down Dormammu and Mordo." "What's Mordo got to do with any of this?" Strange asked, immediately realizing he'd tipped his hand. A sinister smile graced Mephisto's face. "Don't even know about Mordo, eh? Maybe you should be the one asking me what's going on." Strange would never have admitted it out loud, but he welcomed any info Mephisto might have had for him. It was rare the Sorcerer Supreme felt this out of the loop. "You tell me what you know first, and I'll return the favor once you're finished. We both know I'm the only one around here who can be trusted to keep their word." "I never lie, Strange," Mephisto said, his smile growing. "I'm just selective with what information I feel is relevant. On that note, here's what I've got for you. Dormammu's been giving out weapons from the Dark Dimension in exchange for an oath to spill blood with them. He's trapped, and can't give them out in person, of course. So he's been having Mordo do it for him. The only reason Dormammu would pull something this ballsy is if he knew he had a real shot at going after you sanctums." "Sounds about right," Strange admitted. "We've been monitoring the Dark Dimension from all three sanctums. Been noticing far more movement than usual too. There's something odd about it all though. The way Dormammu's been moving his army of mindless ones." "Ah, the mindless ones, extra-dimensional beings made from rock-like material with the shape of a human. Their name said it all, no free will of their own. Just beings meant to be controlled by mystical madmen like Dormammu." The idea of him moving was far from a headline in Mephisto's eyes. "So a general's moving his army? If that's the best you've got for me, I got the raw end of this deal." "It's not that he's moving them, you twisted bastard. It's how he's moving them. The formations, the size of the groups, the locations. none of them line up with how Dormammu usually operates. I've never seen anyone change their strategic style this drastically, ever. Something's not right. Mephisto rubbed his chin in thought. It was worse than he realized. Someone as powerful as Dormammu acting that erratic can't end well for us. We need to track down Mordo and get him to tell us what he knows. That sounded about right to Strange, except for one key detail. There's no we in this scenario. Leave this situation to me and the other sorcerers. Can't do that, Strange. You clearly can't handle this situation on your own. I'll send some assistance your way as soon as I can get them ready. Until then, you keep on tracking Mordo. Don't order me around, Strange said through his teeth. If you think for a second I would ever answer to a vile, unholy, disgusting piece of... Strange was stopped by Mephisto putting a hand to his face. We need to work together, not start insults at each other. It's been a good powwow. But now there's work to be done. I'll be in touch soon, partner. I promise. A burst of flame consumed Mephisto before Strange could rip his head off, something the sorcerer would have loved more than anything right then. The demon lord was gone, and that left Strange with only one thing left to do. Well, Mordo, looks like it's time for a reunion. Why did it have to be the mall? Of all the places in this new world that Kiba could have taken Hinata, why did it have to be the place to combine the two things in the world Hinata hated the most? Shopping and large crowds of people? She swore, if she had to try on one more shirt, got bumped into by one more person, or had one more guy whistle at her like she was a fucking dog who'd come on command, someone was gonna die. How much longer are we going to be at this, Kiba-chan? Hinata asked, following with, we've got enough clothes at this point, don't we? Kiba glanced at her friend and rolled her eyes. You don't even have a shirt for every day of the week yet. We'll have to stop every 3 days to wash our clothes if we did it your way. That might have been true, but the non-stop chattering, gaudy yellow carpet, and sea of clothes that all looked the same to Hinata left her fairly certain that was the preferable situation. It wasn't as though Kiba couldn't just choose something out for her. You know my size for everything, right? I agreed to keep you company, but I never said I'd do any actual shopping. Just pick something for me. The only clothes I'm picking out for you are lingerie, the rest you need to do for yourself. Kiba fried back with a snicker. Hinata turned bright red, just as Kiba had hoped she would. It's the holidays around here. Lots of good deals on presents that we could both enjoy. Hinata's embarrassment was interrupted when Akamaru came walking up to them in his new outfit. A bar of dark blue jeans and sweatshirt with a set of wolf fangs that were designed to look like they'd been spray-painted on. Hinata couldn't help but giggle when she saw it, a little on the nose. Don't you think Akamaru-kun? Wasn't subtle when I was dog. Don't plan on starting now. He's got a point, Hinata, Kiba replied, nothing immediately the furrowing of her wife's brow. Yeah, I dropped the suffix, and you should too. We've got to try and talk like everyone else around here does if we're going to blend in. Hinata realized Kiba was right and made a note to watch out for things like that in future. Little things like that would make them stand out, and the more they stood out, the better the chance they'd find obstacles their search for Naruto. Keeping a low profile was the safest course of action, no doubt. Unfortunately, that line of logic also led to Hinata putting more effort into actually finding some reasonable-looking clothes. A double-edged sword indeed. Against her better judgment, Hinata turned towards the exit of the store and said, then let's go get me some clothes that'll make me seem like I belong around here. Akamaru already paid for his stuff, right? I think he did, Kiba answered before turning to where Akamaru was supposed to be. Akamaru, did you? Oh, come on. Akamaru had found his way over to a girl roughly his age, who was currently biting her lower lip and giving him the doe eyes. Kiba headed over to her brother. That was more accurate thing they could think to call him now that he was human, grabbed him the collar, and proceeded to drag him back over to Hinata. He struggled the whole time naturally. Hey, what are you doing? She seemed really into me. Yeah, I noticed, Kiba grumbled. Not only was her little brother turning out to be a bit of flirt in his human form, the girls were absolutely eating it up. This is the 5th time have to do this today. Getting kinda sick of it, Akamaru. Least this one didn't look ready to shove her hand down your pants. If only Hinata could have brushed that off as a joke. I swear the lovableness he had as a dog is carrying over to him as a human. Back to my original point. Did you get all of that paid for, Akamaru? I took care of it, said a male voice that sent shivers down Hinata's spine, and not in a good way. Her boss had arrived. Can't have you 3 looking like shaggy dogs, can I? Akamaru raised an eyebrow and asked, is he making fun of me? I feel like he's making fun of me. It's a joke about you, but I wouldn't say I'm making fun of you, Mephisto replied. That being said, it was too tempting not ruffle the youth's hair and say, "You're learning to talk fast, aren't you, boy? And they say old dogs can't learn new tricks." If it wasn't for Mephisto's split-second reaction time, he would have gotten his hand bitten clean off by the snapping jaws of Akamaru. This time, he was sure he was being made fun of. "It's not like I didn't understand people before, asshole. I don't have much to learn." Mephisto gave the boy the old deadly glare/wicked grin combo as he said, "You've at least got to learn your manners, boy. I'll tell you that much." "Enough, both of you," Hinata snapped. The last thing they needed was a brawl in the middle of the mall. "Mephisto, I'm guessing you didn't come here to screw with Akamaru. What do you want?" "I've got a new job for you three. It's not much more than an errand really, but it'll be good training for when I send you off to investigate Dormammu." Kiba raised an eyebrow. "And what is this errand exactly?" With a small shrug, Mephisto answered, "Vampire hunting. You're going after a fellow named Morbius." "Wait, vampires?" Kiba asked, unable to believe her ears. "You guys have vampires around here? Like the ones read about in stories back home? Nasty, undead bloodsuckers?" Mephisto's amusement was written all over his face. "I'm afraid so. You'll only have deal with one of them though, so don't worry your pretty little head. This particular vampire didn't get his powers thanks to any sort of magic but rather from an experiment gone wrong. He was attempting to cure some rare blood disease or something like that. They actually like to call him the living vampire because he's not technically undead." "Well, if he's not magic, then what do you want with him?" Hinata asked. Science didn't seem like a keen interest of Mephisto's. Indeed it wasn't, but a powerful creature like Morbius always interested Mephisto. "I think I might be able to cut a deal with him. One along the same lines that I offered to you three. With how nasty things are looking to get, I need to scoop up every minion I can find." Hinata didn't know what she expected. "There's nothing you love more than finding a turtle on its back, is there?" "As long as the turtle can be useful to me," Mephisto added in. "We've talked enough for one afternoon, don't you think? Get whatever else you might need and meet me at entrance to the mall. I'll take care of payment, and that goes for everything you'll ever need from here on out." "Fine, just don't ever call us your minions ever again," Hinata growled. Mephisto couldn't even muster up the effort for an eye roll. "Whatever floats your boat, just don't waste too much of my time." For the second time that day, Mephisto left before someone had the chance to rip his head off. If there was one thing the bastard was good at, it was getting under people's skin. Seeing how stressed the encounter with their boss had made her friend, Kiba tried to lighten the mood. "So you still need some underwear. Do you want plain, cute or sexy?" "Kiba!" Hinata yelled, clear embarrassed. Although Akamaru laughing, it seemed everyone was able to relax a little. "Son of a bitch, it's cold," Akamaru said, rubbing his hands together to try and keep them warm. "I'm wearing a sweatshirt, a coat, and gloves. How am I still freezing my ass off?" Kiba patted her little brother on the head and said, "Because it's less than 30 degrees out here and you're still not used to not having fur, not gonna lie. It's pretty impressive how much snow has fallen in this place since the last time we've been here." The here Kiba was referring to was the forest she and the rest of her little family had first arrived in, and she couldn't have been more right about the snow. A layer at least 4 inches thick covered the ground, and the trees around them shimmered with fresh winter snow. Hinata could have spent all day taking it in if it wasn't so damn cold. "This place looks downright beautiful. I'd almost buy Morbius taking this route just for the scenery." "I hear ya," Kiba replied, the snow crunching under her feet as she walked. "Hopefully we're close to wherever Morbius is camped out. He'd better be right where Mephisto said he'd be. He can't move during the day, so I'm guessing Mephisto's intel is still good," Hinata replied. She took a few more steps before Kiba put her arm out and stopped her. "What's up?" Kiba lifted her head in the air and sniffed before turning to Akamaru. "You smell that?" After giving a sniff of his own, Akamaru replied, "Yeah, Morbius is close, and it smells like he's not alone." "Then I'd suggest you get out of any clothes you're worried about ruining," Hinata said. A small smirk graced her face as she said, "Gotta love clothes that'll change on their own, eh?" "Wipe that grin off your face," Kiba grumbled, removing every piece clothes she wore except for the skin-tight bodysuit. It reached down to her knees, across her elbows, and just below her neck. The trimming was blue and it was made of a black material that was designed to stretch out for when she went full wolf. A little something Mephisto had picked out for Kiba. Mephisto's an asshole. "But this suit isn't half bad. How's yours, Akamaru?" Akamaru's setup was mostly the same, with the exceptions that trimming was red and all he had were the pants. The latter fact left him shivering where he stood. Ask me again when we're in some decent weather. Let's fucking change already, huh? There were no objections. Hinata took a deep breath and focused her mind. Just as Mephisto's book had taught her, purple flame erupted all over her body, turning her into the same figure she'd first become in those same woods a few nights prior. Kiba and Akamaru would follow right after, turning into their brown wolf and white wendigo forms respectively. Unlike last time, the Inuzuka duo were quite grateful to have nice, warm fur growing all over their body. Two giant, hairy monsters and flaming, purple demon hunter, Hinata said, standing in between her two friends. Yeah, that looks about right. I think anybody would shit themselves if they saw this team coming, Kiba remarked before immediately throwing her hands over her mouth. She hadn't been expecting her transformation to come with a voice that was much deeper and more gravely. Holy shit, I should terrifying. Was my voice like this the first time I changed? Hinata nodded. Yeah, pretty much. You were just too overwhelmed to notice. You sound pretty badass to me, Akamaru replied, finding the exact same thing had happened to his voice as well. He reached up, touched his furry throat, saying with a chuckle, "Gonna take me a while to get used to this, but I like it." Akamaru held out his knuckle to Kiba for a fist bump. Kiba rolled her eyes, but smiled and returned the gesture all the same. As soon as they were finished, Hinata pulled out her chain. "Careful not to ignite it this time. Remember, Mephisto wants Morbius alive. We knock him out, tie him up, and wait for Mephisto to come scoop him up. Got it?" Both of Hinata's teammates nodded, so she turned towards the direction of Morbius, took one last deep breath, and started running. It was officially vampire hunting time. Morbius had never despised the cold the way most people did, at least not since he'd become a child of the night. Perhaps it's because his body was already cold and stiff like a corpse. Or maybe it was the thin layer of fur the accident had left him with. Either way, camping in the cold was just fine by him. Thriving in the places others refused to go was what Morbius did best. The vampire stirred in the makeshift bed inside his tent, his eyes opening ever so slightly. He could see through the blue material above his head that it wasn't completely dark yet, but the sun wasn't directly shining on them. Morbius cleared his throat and called to someone outside in his Eastern European accent. "How's it looking out there? Pharaoh? You here?" "Yeah, I'm here," answered a feminine voice with just a touch of gravel. "It's all shaded outside. You should be safe to come out. Just make sure you don't move too far." With a groan, Morbius sat up and cracked his neck. He pushed his way out of the tent and carefully stepped outside, just in case his companion had been lying to him. She hadn't. The small clearing they'd positioned themselves in was entirely in the shade. Morbius looked to Pharaoh, a mutant who was born with light brown fur, claws, and fangs, making her look like a sort of human-feline hybrid. Her hair, which was wild and unkempt, was the same color with the occasional white streak, and she wore a purple leotard to cover herself. Pharaoh was sitting in front of a small fire she'd built, her eyes nowhere close to Morbius' direction. "Wouldn't kill you to greet me," Morbius told her. She still didn't look at him, or not. "I suppose I'm not paying for your company." "Glad you understand," Pharaoh growled. "It was the smell that woke you up, wasn't it?" Morbius glanced around before he replied. "That and the noise. Yes, we've got roughly 30 seconds before our intruders strike. You ready?" The mutant kicked some snow into the fire to extinguish it, stood up, and turned to Morbius. His white fur blended in with the snow, although the dark blue hair and black ensemble still stood out. Not mention his piercing red eyes. Pharaoh had to fight not to feel too uncomfortable around him. Still, a customer was a customer, and really, who was she to judge? She asked Morbius, "You paid me, didn't you?" "That I did," Morbius answered. "The intruders were now less than 5 seconds away. Let us see what fools have come calling upon us." Something came whizzing through the air so fast that Morbius almost didn't have time to notice it. Almost. His hand shot up in the direction the sound was coming from and reacted just in time to catch the chain that was hurtling towards him. It wrapped around the vampire's hand several times after it hit and stung like hell. But that was the worst of it. Nonetheless, the fight had been initiated, and Morbius was ready to retaliate. He yanked the chain with his might and called out, "You want a fight? Fine. You shall see the might of Morbius, the living vampire." As Hinata flew through the air, the harsh winter air whipping her in the face, she started to wonder if she should have thought her plan out just a bit more. She thought the element of surprise and one swing of her chain would end this fight in no time, but Morbius had upended that plan completely, thankfully. Hinata had friends who were more than ready to back her up. Kiba was on all fours chasing after her, a new game plan already formulated in her head. Hinata, give that asshole something that'll distract him. Akamaru, you handle whoever the other weirdo is. Got it? I'm on it, Akamaru called back, tackling Feral, who'd just gotten onto all fours to prepare for a pounce. Needless to say, she hadn't expected him to be that fast. Let's go, bitch. The two of them went rolling off into their own fight, leaving Hinata and Kiba to deal with Morbius. Hinata was upon the vampire, but she'd come prepared, per Kiba's suggestion. She'd created a ball of purple flame in her hand and was preparing to shove into her opponent's chest. Morbius was once again quick to deflect the attack before it could hit, ducking under it at superhuman speed and then grabbing Hinata's wrist so she couldn't try anything again. He had to admit, though, it was a good effort. That's some powerful magic, my dear. What you lack in skill, you make up for in raw power and spitfire. How do you like this spitfire? Kiba screamed. She reached Morbius and skidded in the snow to sweep him by the legs. The vampire was too focused on Hinata to react this time, making it easy for Kiba to knock his feet out from under him and send him face first onto the ground. Hinata was able to break free, much to her partner's joy. That's more like it. We'll kick this guy's ass together. I highly doubt that, Morbius said, leaping up off the ground so quickly either of his foes could comprehend it. He smashed his palm into both of their chests, sending them hurtling into a large tree. This was escalating too quickly for his liking. I have no quarrel with the two of you. Turn back so we may forget this entire incident. Kiba got up, dug her clawed hands into the tree bark behind her, and pushed off to get all the moment she could as pounced towards Morbius. Fuck you. Rather than respond, Morbius closed his eyes. He calmed himself as best he could and waited until he felt the perfect moment. In an instant, Morbius opened his eyes and leapt to the left, jetting his arm out to clothesline Kiba as she dove towards him. Morbius stopped her dead in her track and slammed her onto the ground below. Kiba yelped in pain, prompting Hinata to stand up and cry out, "Leave her alone!" She made another fireball in her hand, but the purple flame never got anywhere close to its target. Morbius was upon her with his hand around her throat before she could do much of anything. Hinata couldn't have summed things up any better than Morbius was about to. Seems you ladies have bit off more than you can chew. Things were faring far better for Akamaru, though that may have had something to do with him having a much less threatening opponent. While Feral was a more than solid fighter, Morbius had hired her to scope out the terrain and find the safest route for him to travel through. Her skill, speed, and strategy were all top-notch, but she didn't have much of an answer for raw strength, which was what she dealing with now, and not dealing with it all that well either. I swear I'm gonna rip your nuts off and feed them to you, you giant pain in the ass. Feral growled as she made another run at Akamaru. She bared her claws and leapt for him, intent on slashing his throat. Akamaru pulled his arm back and smacked her away before she ever got the chance, sending Feral skidding several feet away. Another item on the list of ways he was pissing her off. You think you're still winning? You might be stronger, but I'd put my brain up against yours any day of the week. This is a fight, not a quiz HUI. Feral had grabbed a handful of snow and thrown it in Akamaru's eyes. She leapt onto his chest, using one claw to latch onto him, while she raised up her other to take another shot at his throat. Out of pure instinct, Akamaru threw his head forward and headbutted Feral, knocking off from his chest and him enough time to rub the snow from his eyes. It was like Akamaru was just trying to vex Feral now. Oh ho, when I get my hands on you. Now it was Akamaru's turn to interrupt. He slashed at Feral while she was still on the ground and she was only able to roll out of the way by a millisecond. One of his claws caught her costume and tore it, particularly in the chest area. Feral jumped up to find she mostly exposed, and Akamaru couldn't help but notice, "W.O. Lady, your TIR, your breasts." "Yeah, I know." "So what? You're acting like you've never seen a pair of boobs before," Feral snapped. The way Akamaru averted his gaze made Feral realize something that could help her win this fight. "You haven't, have you?" "Not in person at least, humph. You wanna see 'em up close?" Akamaru almost blurted out hell yes, but knew this might be a trap. Still, what a tempting thought. "Moment I come over there, you'll try and gut me, unless I had a guarantee." "A guarantee?" Feral laughed. He wasn't smart enough to think up anything that would actually keep him safe, however. He might be stupid enough to think up something he thought was a guarantee that would give Feral the opening she needed to kill him. What did you have in mind? With careful steps, Akamaru approached Feral. He put steak knife-sized claw up to her throat with just enough pressure to keep from killing her. Then, much to Feral's shock, Akamaru began to shrink down to his human form. His thumb still pressed tight to her throat, even tighter than before. Akamaru whispered into Feral's ear, I can get this hand back up to normal size faster than you'd believe. Try anything, and I'll puncture you windpipe and heartbeat, got it? Feral couldn't deny. That was a better plan than she'd been expect. The young man's age helped explain why he'd never seen a pair of breasts before, and it meant he might be easy to distract if she got his mind hazy of enough. If worse came to worst, she could at least drain him of any stamina he might have left. Luckily, Akamaru was pretty cute too. This would be child's play for Feral. I got it, big guy, now come on, don't be shy. Pain in every part of my body, Hinata groaned, trying to stand up only to feel a vampire's fist buried into her stomach. She fell to the ground, the wind knocked clean out of her. Mother, fucker. Morbius stood over the Ghost Rider, shaking his head. It would be a shame to snuff creatures as wonderful as yourself. Please, I beg of you, end this pointless exchange. If it were only that simple. Hinata caught her breath and told her foe, no can do, we really don't have any other option but to bring you in. If we could just kill you outright, this thing would be over already. But you cannot, so your fiery chain and penance stare are of no use to you, Morbius reminded her. Hinata's eyes widened at his knowledge of her powers. Surprise, my young friend? I know of the riders like you, the ones I've met tend to be far more skilled though. You are a newborn rider, yes? What she is none of your concern, Kiba screamed. Flying through the air towards Morbius, he rotated on his feet and caught her by the throat, squeezing her so hard she couldn't breathe. Gah! I can't, she struggled, which only made Morbius squeeze harder. I hope you were trying to distract me. Can't imagine any other reason you'd try an attack that has failed so many times. Hinata's hand instantly shot up to protect Kiba. She shot a massive stream of purple flame from her hand right at Morbius. The angle of it sent him flying into a tall tree nearby, right up towards the leaves and branches. It wasn't long before Hinata ran out of steam and Morbius came crashing to the ground below, a fall that was about 20 feet in total. Everything around him shook like an earthquake when Morbius landed, kicking up all kinds of fluffy white powder, making it impossible to see him. When that powder finished dancing in the air and settled on the ground, the vampire's silhouette became visible, and it was walking right for Hinata. Oh, we are so screwed. I've played enough of these games, Morbius screamed. Away with both of you! It would have been away with both of them, had it not been for one small little detail. The leaves Hinata had shot Morbius into had caught flame thanks to the attack, quickly spreading and weakening the surrounding branches. A glorious bundle of blazing purple foliage broke free from the rest, falling to the snow below where it promptly died out due to a lack of any reachable brush on the ground to keep feeding it. More importantly though, these events had created a massive hole in the tree line above, a hole that now let in a great big circle of sunlight. The rays of light struck Morbius directly, sending a pain like no other coursing through his body. No! Not the sun! Aha! Why didn't we think of this sooner? Kiba asked, suddenly feeling pretty foolish for not doing this from the start. We had his weakness literally hanging above our heads. I'll knock him out, you tie him up. Kiba was off and running towards her target before Hinata could say anything. Really, it didn't matter. Hinata fully supported her companion's plan. The wolf girl reached Morbius in no time, and decided the best course of action would be to work out her frustrations on the vampire's head. She struck the vampire once in the chin, once in the cheek, and once in the temple, a combo that, in combinations with his entire body being seared and sizzled in the sun, left Morbius utterly unconscious, with him unable to struggle. Hinata rushed over and wrapped her chain around the vampire as tight as she could, then used her hands to weld the two ends of the chain together in a seal that was stronger than any knot in the world. Thanks to her reading, Hinata knew the chain would come back to her in perfect condition when she decided to summon it again. We did it, Kiba cheered. We won. Woohoo! We kicked fucking ass, baby. Hinata didn't quite see it that way. She pulled Morbius out of the sunlight to keep him alive before reminding Kiba. If those leaves hadn't caught on fire, we'd be dead right now. We got lucky. Simple as that. You guys got lucky too? Asked the voice of Akamaru, who was walking over to the girls in human form with a mostly naked Feral in his arms. Not exactly the something they'd been expecting. What are the odds? Neither girl dared to speak at first. Sweat dropped from both their foreheads as his sister dared to ask, Akamaru, did you fuck the woman you were supposed to be fighting? Akamaru gave a sheepish grin. Yeah, but in my defense, she came on to me. I thought it was a trap at first, and I'm still pretty sure that's what it started as. But we were both really into it by the time we were done, isn't that right, Farrell? So, good, Farrell managed to whimper out. She was tired, but there was a goofy grin on her face as well. He's supposed to run out of stamina eventually. But he didn't, he just kept going and going and going. Can't tell you the last time I came, he kept up with me good. I actually feel satisfied for fuck's sake. And I finally got laid as a human, Akamaru said with pride. He glanced down at the older woman and boasted, guess the cougars can't get enough of me. Next thing Akamaru knew, he had a face full of snow thanks to his big sister, then another, and another, and another. Kiba had gone back into her human form, and was throwing as many snowballs as she made directly at her brother's face. Bad Akamaru. Stop thinking with your dick. Hinata let it go on just long enough to get her jealous, then grabbed Kiba's arm. That's enough. Let's just get Morbius back to Mephisto before he decides to wake up. We should at least start acting like we know what we're doing. It's not like Naruto's out there worried about weird shit like this. Naruto was literally shaking. He stood in the hotel shower, the water turned to the coldest setting he could manage, while his entire body shook. It had been 3 days since he and Laura had went underground for their journey to the Xavier Institute, and in that time Naruto hadn't gotten anything close to a proper release. Now he was literally itching for some human contact. But the situation left him utterly unable to receive any. Worse still, the cold shower had proven completely useless. Should have known that was coming, Naruto grumbled as he walked out of the hotel bathroom wearing nothing but a towel. Guess it's another night of using my fucking hand. Gag. I feel like I'm going crazy. Falling back onto his bed, one virtually exactly the same as the one he'd slept the first night of travel, Naruto groaned and racked his brain trying to think up some kind of way to find a woman he could spend the night with. The desk clerk at the hotel? No, she was married, and Naruto would have to take off his hood in a lobby that looked like it might have cameras. Another person staying here? Nah, it wasn't like Naruto could just go around knocking on doors trying to put moves on people. Cleaning lady maybe? Yeah, like she'd be around at this time of night, and just randomly be up a roll in the sack. Just when Naruto was ready to give up all hope, he heard a knock at the door. With nothing but a towel wrapped around his waist, he walked over the door and took a look through the peephole at who was there. It was Laura, and the look on her face suggested it was important. Naruto opened the door and motioned for her to come in, trying not to notice how good she smelled. Hey Laura, come on in. I should probably warn you, I'm hornier than a dog in heat? Yeah, I heard. Naruto blushed and closed the door. Laura was only wearing a pair of athletic shorts and a sports bra, not exactly lingerie. But the way she pulled it off left Naruto weak in the knees. I was gonna say just wearing a towel, but yeah, that too. She noticed the towel. Oh lord, how she noticed. Laura took in Naruto's body, his tight abs, exhausted whiskers, and charming boyish smile, and fought with herself internally. It took all the courage she could muster to blurt out at him, "Get on the bed." What? Get on the bed, Laura repeated. I wanna sleep with you. Naruto couldn't believe his own ears. Wait, you mean you wanna have sex? The young lady nodded. Laura, you don't have to do that, I'll be just fine. I'm not doing it for you, Laura snapped, blushing worse than Naruto now. I wanna know what sex is like, okay? Those girls you've been with, they make it sound like a lot of fun. Not exactly the sort of compliment Naruto had been expecting to get that night. Oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. Not that I wouldn't love that, and I do mean love, Naruto began, trying not to get too excited from the very thought of it. But you know you don't have to do it with me, right? A girl like you could find any guy you wanted. Laura stopped blushing and started smiling. Here Naruto was, being offered reprieve from some genuine pain. And that's the first thing out of his mouth. You're over there, shaking like a puppy in the rain. And you're worried about me. Come here, Naruto. Sure thing, Naruto said. He had no idea what to expect as he walked over to Laura. Imagine his shock. She grabbed his towel and ripped it off from her. Hey, sure, I'm giving you what you want, Laura whispered, leaning into Naruto's ear. Without fear, she pulled her sports bra up over her head and tossed it aside, followed by removing her shorts. Every inch of her smooth skin was visible for Naruto to see, and Laura could tell it thrilled him. His excitement was on full display, and knowing that she was responsible made Laura feel that much more beautiful. Looks like we're even. I'm gonna tell you a secret, Naruto. I've been thinking about you at night, when I'm all alone. It makes me feel good, and I want to make you feel good too, so what do you say? It was official. The dam broke. Naruto scooped Laura up in his arms and kissed her, passion surging through both of their bodies. They tumbled back onto the bed, where Naruto regained just enough of his focus to break the kiss and warn his lover, Laura, your first time. It's gonna hurt a bit, okay? But I promise I'll go slow and that it'll feel really good before you know it, alright? Laura nodded. She already knew that, but his concern was sweet. Both lovers returned their attention to one another, beginning a dance that would continue well into the night. At this particular dance, Laura would prove herself to be a natural, and Naruto would be the best partner she ever could have hoped for. Utter bliss. Those were the only words Naruto could think of to describe how he felt in this moment. The morning sun had just begun to peek through the bottom of the hotel curtains. He was warm and comfortable under his hotel sheets, and lying next to him was a beautiful woman he'd shared an incredible night with. His mind was buzzing with all sorts of thoughts, the sort that he didn't feel comfortable repeating out loud, thoughts about how much he enjoyed being with Laura on more than just a physical level. In a rare turn of events, Naruto felt as though he was doing more than fulfilling the incessant needs Mephisto had burdened him with. Naruto had spent time with Laura, gotten to know her, connected with her, and only then did he get to be with her. Something about the whole process made the final product feel that much more satisfying. She felt better than any girl he'd ever been with before, even She-Hulk. Laura began to stir next to Naruto as he gazed at her soft features. Her eyes slowly opened and she felt her lover's arm wrapped around her. She smiled and turned to Naruto. Good morning. Good morning to you. She smiled and gave him a small kiss. Laura felt the sun on her face as she pulled away and suddenly realized the alarm didn't go off. That's on me, Naruto admitted. You look so peaceful there. Last thing I wanted to do was wake you. It was impossible to be angry with him. Laura hadn't gotten this much sleep in days. Guess it doesn't really matter when we leave. Naruto liked the sound of that. Oh really? Then I think a repeat performance might be in order. You just read my mind, stud, Laura replied. She sat up, threw her leg over Naruto's body, and began to straddle him all in one motion. Leaning down, she whispered into his ear, I'm still new at all this. I think a little more practice will help me straighten some things out. Laura, keeping up with me last night was a feat all on its own. Naruto showered the girl with praise. They began to kiss with just a bit more passion than she had a few moments ago. It was meant to lead to something more. But Naruto pulled away, intent on getting something out of the way first. About last night, someone's first time is a really big deal. Especially for a person like you who had to wait so long for it. You deciding to share with me made it really, I don't know, special. It's the kind of thing I'm taking with me to my grave. Do you get what I'm saying? The more Naruto spoke, the more Laura could feel a blush growing on her face. Naruto had been with a lot of women, but the way he was talking about her, boy, Laura didn't respond with words, but by pressing her lips back onto his, charged with every ounce of emotion she felt at that moment. She really couldn't have been happier with the man she got to ride with on this little trip. Mordo had never exactly been a model sorcerer. He'd shown doubts from his earliest days in training, and when he finally turned and revolted against his brothers and sisters, it came as no surprise, not even to his dear friend Dr. Strange. The two had grown somewhat close during their training under the Ancient One, but apparently not close enough to stop Mordo from siding with madmen like Dormammu. Dr. Strange was sitting by himself in his street clothes, khaki pants with a white dress shirt and overcoat, at a small cafe in New York City, waiting for the man he'd once called his ally to show up. It was an ordinary cafe, with modern glass tables and a black and white decor designed to look as appealing to the eye and inoffensive as possible. Strange sipped on his coffee while he waited, occasionally glancing at the people around him eating their breakfast. At a table not too far from his own, Strange could see a young surgeon, stuffing his face with as much food as he could in the shortest amount of time. He was probably getting ready for another late night at a hospital, just starting to pay off student loans that had cost him God only knew how much. Feeling nostalgic, Strange? The voice of Baron Mordo snapped Strange back into reality. He turned to see his old friend, who'd also come in his street clothes. He had jet black hair, a goatee, and wore black suit a emerald green tie, all of which was perfectly maintained. Mordo sat down across from his Strange, who addressed him immediately. Mordo, you actually showed up. You made it sound urgent. Didn't want to disappoint you. For the record, you didn't answer my original question. Strange sighed, took another sip of his coffee, and replied, I miss operating rooms sometimes, but I'm still helping people where I can. That was a sentimental idea that Mordo had little time for. Still wasting your powers to save ants and boost your precious ego. HM? What a pity. If you would just toss aside the hypocritical malarkey that the Ancient One loved to spout, you could accomplish great things. All the sorcerers want is to protect their own power. Think about what men such as you and I didn't come here to listen to you to go off on a cliché bad guy rant, Strange interrupted. Mordo scowled at him, but he continued nonetheless. I came here because I know what you and Dormammu are trying to do. I thought you learned your lesson about working for that psychopath. But apparently it's true what they say about old habits dying hard. Dormammu can offer me power you and your friends can only dream of. It's nothing personal, just the path that best suits me, though I must admit, I do have my reservations this time around. That was a phrase you didn't hear from Mordo often. Strange needed to dig a bit deeper on this one. Something in Dormammu's new plan you're not too fond of. Mordo hesitated before giving a brief nod. There's a particular person he's become obsessed with, and some spells he's been having me look into that I simply can't wrap my head around. His behavior in general is a massive deviation from what I'm used to. Funny, that's the same thing Mephisto and I have been talking about, Strange told his old friend. He knew the demon's name would get Mordo's attention. That's right. This whole thing has got me nervous enough to talk him. And it seems like we're all saying the same thing. Mordo, we need to stop Dormammu before this whole thing gets out of hand. You know it. I know. And Mephisto even knows it. You need to work with us, for everyone's sake. Quite the rousing speech, but one that Mordo didn't respond to for quite some time. It seemed his time toying with the dark side of magic had left him hesitant to help Strange even in a situation this dire. Luckily, his hesitation didn't go so far as to make him stupid. He waved down a nearby waitress as he told Strange, I'll tell you everything I know and stop assisting Dormammu. But that's all I'll guarantee to for now. Just need a cup of coffee before we begin. Hope you're almost ready for this trip to be over, Naruto called from the front of his motorcycle. Laura sat behind him with her arm wrapped him as usual, her hair blowing in the wind despite the helmet she wore. It was hard to hear Naruto through the sound of his bike's engine. Look just up ahead, you're gonna like what you see. Laura did as she'd been asked and peered over her lover's shoulder, looking past the long road before them to see something just barely in her line sight. They'd been on the road for hours, having finally passed into New York so they could make their way to Westchester, the home of the Xavier Institute. It made sense then that the something she could just barely see was a gate, surrounded by trees, with the top floor of mansion just peeking over them. The sight of it made Laura's heart nearly jump out of her chest. The X-Mansion. Holy shit, we actually made it. Told you I could get you here, didn't I? Naruto asked with his foxy grin. He loved seeing Laura so excited. Let me do the talking when we get to the gate. They know me, even if they don't always like me. I should be able to... Why exactly Naruto had begun to trail off, Laura had no idea, and made her more than a little nervous. Naruto reacted, but not to his name being called. He let go of the motorcycle handles, spun himself around so he's sitting sideways on the right side of his bike, and grabbed Laura before pushing both her and himself off the vehicle, screaming as he did, hit the deck. What the hell are you? Laura began to ask, but she'd never get the chance to finish. Something she couldn't see came hurling towards the motorcycle before she could, and it struck Naruto's bike in one hell of a glorious explosion. The whole thing was in pieces by the time she and Naruto landed, a landing that hurt like hell, Laura might add. She couldn't decide if she was more pissed or confused. Fuck me. I think I broke a rib. Ack, you're lucky I have a healing factor. Yes, he is, called a sinister southern drawl that both heroes recognized right away. From through the smoke and fire created by Naruto's bike, they could see a figure making his towards them. In his robotic hand was a military-graded guided missile launcher with 4 barrels and the Hydra insignia on it, and on his face was an excited grin. Donald Pierce had found them. Hello there, X-23, Ghost Rider. It is so wonderful to see you two again. Me and the boys have been waiting a long time for you two to come around. Laura pushed herself up off the ground, her claws out and ready to tear some assholes apart. The boys? You brought me some company to rip into? Behind Pierce, nearly a dozen more silhouettes became visible, the vast majority of which revealed themselves to be heavily armed Hydra agents. One, however, stood out among the crowd. It was a figure in A with a black cloak over his face that stretched all the way down to his feet. Underneath it was what looked to be black combat armor, with a set of silver boots and gloves with a matching belt. The figure, who appeared to be male, raised his right hand in the air and pointed it at Laura. His voice was gravely and commanding. If there's going to be any ripping today, it'll be done by me. Ah crap, Naruto grumbled as he leapt up onto his feet, immediately triggering his Ghost Rider transformation. He recognized the hooded figure, and wasn't too pleased to him. Hydra went and busted you out too, Williams? As Naruto asked his question, the figure's hand began to transform. It seemed Pierce wasn't the only one with robotic limbs, as the figure's palm and fingers disassembled and promptly reassembled themselves into the blade of a scythe. This was a blade of Reaper. If you're going to address me, Ghost Rider, do it properly. I've more than earned the right to be called Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper was a mercenary who worked for HYDRA, but was once known as Eric Williams, a mid-level criminal in New York City who'd agreed to participate in an experiment being done by Hydra scientists in order to get his clean as a white shirt on a Sunday brother, Simon, out of jam. Now he was Hydra's Reaper, with a weapon that concealed all kinds of wonderfully wicked surprises. Said surprises would soon be used on the foes in front of him. Not that it seemed to concern them too much. Laura in particular looked less than impressed. The Grim Reaper? You look like a trick-or-treater, not a deadly mercenary. Seems you've inherited your father's overconfidence. The Grim Reaper replied, his voice remained even. Pierce, would you mind if I took first crack at her? Be my guest, just don't underestimate the bitch. Naruto and Laura finally saw the first proper show of emotion from the Grim Reaper. He was smirking, wouldn't dream of it. The HYDRA agent dove towards Laura, who did immediately backflip to avoid him. Naruto was ready to jump in and assist her, but the sound of a dozen safeties being clicked off killed any chance of that. He whipped out his chain and ignited it, staring down the squadron that was ready to light him. These guys didn't scare him, but they had irritated him, and that may have been worse. You really think bullets are gonna be enough to stop me? Not really, Pierce admitted with a smirk. He lifted the missile launcher back onto his shoulder and put his finger by the trigger. But this might be. A second missile came flying out of another barrel on the launcher, this one headed straight for Naruto. The Ghost Rider rolled his eyes, or eye sockets to be more accurate, and slid his chain across his glove until he got just the right amount of slack. He swung that slack at missile, but not to destroy it. No, he'd angled it in just way so the chain wrapped around the missile, allowing him to give it a yank and change the projectile's trajectory. Pierce figured out what was coming their way just in time to call out, "Scatter!" The HYDRA agents lowered their weapons and ran in all different directions just as Naruto swung the chain, and by extension the missile, right for them. He aimed for the spot that was roughly in the middle of the scattering men, slamming the missile onto the ground and creating a good-sized explosion. Every one of the Ghost Rider's foes was sent flying back, all of them landing on the harsh road beneath them. There were likely some bruises and contusions. Considering how deadly Naruto's opening moves had been in the past, this one was fairly forgiving. Consider that a warning shot, the Ghost Rider growled. You all turn around right now, and I'll let you run on back to Strucker with your tail between your legs. The only alternative is death. Not trying to scare you, just giving you the facts. Just giving us the facts? Pierce repeated, standing up the quicker than any of his men. Well then I ought to return the favor. I got a couple of upgrades before I came here. Let me show you one. Pierce's robotic hand jetted out in Naruto's direction and shot off from the mercenary's arm. This time though, there was no wire connecting back to his arm. It was being propelled by what looked to be some kind of purple-colored, high-powered sonic wave. The hand reached the Ghost Rider and latched on, transferring the power of those waves right onto him. Whatever it was, it tore through Naruto's body and put him in a fair amount of pain. Nothing he hadn't felt before, but enough to get his attention for sure. Naruto let out a small scream. Son of a bitch! What is this? The hand let go of Naruto and flew back over to Pierce's arm like it was being magnetically pulled. With his limb reattached, Pierce was more than happy to answer his foe's question. Vibranum, motherfucker. A little something I had modeled after the same tech General Claus used for his sonic emitter. It ain't anywhere near as powerful as his, and I can't keep it going half as long. But it seems like it's enough to get under your skin, Ghost Rider. Vibranium, huh? Well, that explains it, Naruto grumbled as he clutched his sore skull. Vibranium was quite possibly the strongest metal in the world, thanks to its ability to absorb kinetic energy, and then use the energy to strengthen its molecular bonds, and could emit extremely powerful sonic waves if used properly. General Claw had actually crossed Naruto's path before this, and the Ghost Rider learned the hard way that a viburnum strike at full blast was no joke. Like Pierce had said, his wasn't anywhere near as strong as Claw's, but that didn't matter. There was enough power to it to complicate things for Naruto. You always find new ways to make people's lives hard, don't you, Pierce? Pierce took it as a genuine compliment. It's my gift, that and tracking mutants, anyways. The latter was actually something Naruto had been meaning to ask about. Speaking of which, how'd you manage to find us? Oh please. Any jackass could see that girl was cut from the same cloth as Wolverine, Pierce boasted. He motioned over the X-Mansion and said, there was no way that girl was going anywhere but to see her daddy. When I found out you two went underground, I knew the only option I had left was to wait at your final destination, so here we are, with me about to kick the hell out of a Ghost Rider and take that bitch back to Hydra where she belongs. Naruto almost wanted to laugh. You know what all the people who talk to me the way you do have in common? They're all burning in the fires of hell. Get ready, 'cause you're about to pay for every mutant you've ever hunted. I'm collecting on your sins, Pierce. Let's do this. It seems your skill far exceeds what we ever dreamed you might be capable of. The Grim Reaper praised Laura as he took another swing at her. His foe put her claws out in front of her in an X shape to catch the blow. She had no trouble stopping the scythe, another fact that impressed the Reaper. You truly are a testament to what the scientists of Hydra are capable of. Laura extended the claw in her foot and gave swift kick aimed the Grim Reaper's ribs. He disengaged and leapt to right before it could land completely. Though it sliced through his armor and grazed the left of his abdomen, drawing blood, she planned to spill much more of it before the fight reached its end. If I wanted to listen to somebody flatter me, I'd go on a fucking date. Stop talking and start fighting. There was a vicious nature to X-23, one the Reaper was sure Hydra could use to accomplish so many things, but only if she could be captured first. The girl was already on the offensive, charging right for the Grim Reaper with her claws bared. Laura dove at him and swung her claws, though this time the Reaper managed to get out of the way before she could do any damage. He retaliated by bringing his blade down upon X-23 with all the force he could muster. She managed to jump before she could be sliced down the middle, leaving the Reaper with nothing but dirt to dig his scythe into. Laura saw her chance and stomped on her opponent's arm, jamming the blade in even deeper and giving her the chance to deliver two strong punches and one swift kick to the Grim Reaper's face. It sent Laura's foe reeling back with enough force to dislodge his scythe, give him a bloody lip. Ha ha ha. The Grim Reaper chuckled as he wiped the blood from his lip. You are something special. I really do hope you come to your senses. It'd be such a shame to see Hydra forced to dissect such a promising specimen. If there's gonna be cutting, I'd rather do it myself. Laura fired back. She was running full speed at the Grim Reaper, who raised up his scythe and pointed it at her. The gesture did nothing to slow Laura down. You're about to have that thing shoved so far up your... She never got the chance to finish. A magnetic pulse shot from the Reaper's scythe, hitting Laura head-on and stopping her inches away from reaching her target. The girl screamed out in pain, a sound that was music to the Grim Reaper's ears. Laura fell to her knees as her foe continued to chuckle. You didn't think all it could do was turn into a scythe, did you? Doesn't matter what it can do. Tricks like that only work on my once. All you've done is give yourself a few more seconds to live. The Grim Reaper returned to his battle stance and replied, We'll see, little girl. It seemed Laura was right about Pierce. He had far more than his robotic hand to rely on. Naruto had met few people who could keep up with him in his Ghost Rider form, but Pierce was holding his own far better than most. Between whatever other augmentations his limbs had, Naruto hadn't seen them yet, but he was confident they were there. And the vibranium power punches he was throwing around, the mutant hunter was proving himself a worthy foe. Whether or not he thought he could actually beat Naruto was another story. While things weren't looking dire for Pierce, he'd yet find an attack that could stun the Ghost Rider for longer than a few seconds. Naruto, on the other hand, had shown off more than a few moves that could prove fatal if they weren't properly dodged. Pierce's mechanically enhanced reflexes were the only thing that had saved him so far, and based on what his foes seemed to be preparing for him, he wasn't sure how much longer that was going to work. Humph, think you're clever, don't you? Naruto asked as he stood in front of Pierce, both of them panting. Behind them stood the Hydra agents, too terrified to move. They'd only been watching up to his point. And oh, what a battle they had witnessed, moves too fast for the human eye to follow, attacks so powerful they could kill a normal man in one blow, and strategies that had been thought out nearly a dozen blows in advance, all between two incredible fighters. Incredible, and yet, it was somehow still far from over. The Ghost Rider threw his chain over his shoulder and wrapped it around his body once more, then lifted both hands into the air. An orange glow began to grow within them. You might be fast, but there's no way in hell you can outrun this. That orange glow burst into a massive fireball the size of Naruto, sending a heat wave crashing into every one of his foes. With the mighty roar of a Ghost Rider, Naruto took one step forward to plant his feet in the ground and started to hurl the fireball forward. Pierce felt like a deer in headlights. Yep, ain't no way I'm dodging that. Flame obscured Naruto's line of sight, but he could still hear. The first thing he heard was the chatter of gunfire, as the Hydra agents pointed their guns in his direction and began to fire. It seemed they thought it might somehow stop the Ghost Rider's attack. A few stray bullets hit Naruto, but they did nothing. After that, he heard what sounded like a small sonic boom, which only could have come from Pierce. What his opponent had done, Naruto had no idea. He'd find out shortly. Haha! Don't need to dodge when you got a vibranium arm, came the mad laughter of Pierce. When the flame cleared, all of the Hydra agents had been turned to ash, but Pierce was still standing, or kneeling more accurately. His fist was slammed into the ground, and in front of him was a small wall made of vibranium energy. It was a makeshift force field that had just saved the mutant hunter's life. I'll give it to you though, that was some spicy stuff you just threw. Not as spicy as what's coming up next, Naruto roared, charging at Pierce while he was still on the ground. Hellfire engulfed his fists, which were ready to break and or burn every bone in his foe's body. Pierce tried to jump up, but his position had left him too vulnerable. There was no time for him to try anything before the Ghost Rider's fists came tumbling onto him, smashing into his gut, his face, and his chest. It didn't stop there either, as Naruto made sure to stomp on Pierce's ankle and put a boot into his chest that sent the bastard skidding through the ground behind him. A hell of a combo, but not one that took out Pierce permanently. He was able to get back up onto his feet, albeit with some noticeable damage. Pieces of his skin looked as though they'd peeled off from his face, chest, and ankle, and while there were small trickles of blood, most of what it exposed was robot parts that matched Pierce's hand. The mutant hunter was on his last legs and he knew it. Pierce swayed as he spoke. So, that's how it's gonna be, huh? I was hoping I could win the fight without bringing out the big guns. But you haven't given me much of a choice. Say your prayers, Ghost Rider, you're about to get sent home. Somehow, I doubt that, Naruto snapped back. Pierce brought his hand up and pointed towards his foe with an open palm, making Naruto groan. Ah, not this shit again. Naruto was jerked back before he knew it as Pierce's hand shot towards him at the speed of a bullet. This time, something was different though. It wasn't just the hand like it had been before. This time there was something that came with it. That something was a metal cylinder with what piece of vibranium stored inside. And that vibranium was vibrating far too violently for this to be anything good. Pierce was grinning ear to ear as he watched the entire thing. Cue the fireworks. Looking down, there was only the Ghost Rider could think to say, ah fuck. A few moments prior, Laura and the Reaper were neck and neck. Whatever advantage she'd had before he busted out his electronic pulse attacks were gone. If Laura got too close to the Reaper, she knew she was in for a shock. But the Reaper wasn't fast enough to keep Laura in range of his attacks. The result was a stalemate, and one that they couldn't keep up for much longer. How long do you intend for us to dance like this, X-23? The Grim Reaper asked as he sent another pulse flying towards Laura. She ducked under it and charged towards him. You're a lovely partner, but there's the matter of getting you home to consider. Going on the offensive, Laura tried to slide down and sweep the Reaper's legs out from under him before he could shock her. He leaped over the attack, rotated as soon as he hit the ground, trying to hit Laura with another pulse before she escaped his grasp. It was too late. His shot wasn't even fast enough to scorch his foe's hair. Laura went upright once again and turned towards the Reaper. I'm already home. The Grim Reaper shook his head. Such a foolish little girl. He had an entire speech prepared for her in his head, about how foolish it was to think she could ever live among Xavier's mutants, citing that fact that she was nothing more than animalistic, genetically bred weapon who wanted to play at being an orphan. Those were all things he would have said too, if wasn't for the ear-shattering explosion of vibranium that happened mere feet away from them. Naruto! There was hardly time for the Grim Reaper to register what he'd heard the girl scream before the whole thing began. The explosion that preceded it all had been quite small, a mere 6 feet wide, but had been so because of its design. It was created to do as much damage as possible in those 6 feet, and it packed a punch that could even make the thing flinch. Laura knew that blast had been designed for Naruto, and she needed to see if he was alright, and no Reaper was going to stand in her way. Laura was in front of her foe before he could blink. The Reaper would have hit her with an electric pulse, if it wasn't for the fact that he felt a sharp pain shoot through his windpipe before he could. His breathing stopped, his side disengaged, and he looked down to see what had happened. When he saw what was waiting for him, the 2 claws on Laura's right hand stabbed straight through his throat. The Grim Reaper knew he met his end. Killing the Grim Reaper? Not bad, little girl, not bad at all. Those would be the last words he spoke before Laura ripped her claws from the Reaper's flesh and sent blood spewing everywhere. Her claws dripped scarlet as he fell to his knees, nearly dead before he hit the ground. What had gotten into Laura, she couldn't entirely say. She didn't even know she could move that fast. Laura did know Naruto was in trouble though, and for the time being, that was all she needed to know. She rushed towards the site of the explosions, screaming out once again, Naruto. It was impossible for Pierce not to be a little proud of himself. After all, he just killed a Ghost Rider. Sure, it cost him an arm that was worth more than anything he'd ever owned in his life. But with how much this was going to drive his price up, he didn't care. Pierce was on cloud 9. Ah, hell to the fucking yes. That is what you get when you fuck with Donald Pierce. Haha, you son of a bitch, a voice screamed from the purple mist. It wasn't Naruto, but it sure as hell sounded familiar. Pierce didn't need long to piece together it was, and it quickly killed his moment of victory. The voice screamed a second time as it dove from the mist. I'm gonna rip your head off. Well, that didn't last long. Pierce grumbled as Laura tackled him, her arms outstretched so she could stab him in the chest as she did. He fell onto his back, allowing to Laura pin him to ground. Ah shit. You ain't gonna know what hit you when I get up, bitch. Laura twisted her claws, making Pierce scream that much louder. Why? Why the fuck did you have to come in here to ruin everything when it was going so well? I'm gonna have a family, and friends, and I've even got a lover. Why can't you people leave me alone and just let me have that? Nkaha, came a growl from the purple haze. Laura, move. There was no mistaking that voice. Laura smiled, at first in relief, and then in twisted glee when she realized what was coming for Pierce. He must have known too, because he was panicking. And now hold on. We can cut a deal. You don't let that thing come near me, and I promise. Rather than listen to him babble on, Laura ripped her claws from Pierce's body and cleared the way. Like a phoenix from the ashes, the Ghost Rider emerged from the haze. Admittedly with more cracks in his skull and tears in his coat than usual, he made his way to Pierce, who was desperately trying to stand up and get away, and grabbed him by the shirt before he could fully get up off the ground. Naruto grabbed Pierce's face and forced him to look into the Ghost Rider in the eyes. At first all he felt was the heat radiating off Naruto's body. Then, he started to feel a little bit more. Donald Pierce! Boomed the voice of the rider. You've taken the lives of countless mutants and other innocents in the name of sport. For this, you must face what awaits you in the afterlife. Prepare yourself, mortal. For the penance stare. No! Wait, please God, Pierce cried out, but God had no intentions of saving him. The pain of every sin he'd ever committed, all the people he'd killed and the pain it had put their loved ones through, seared his body all at once. Pierce got what he deserved as his body turned to ash and his began its descent to hell. And just like that, it was over. Pierce was reduced to a pile of ash, and there was no one left to challenge. Naruto returned to his human form, which had a few cuts and bruises that had transferred over from the rider form, and fell to his knees, clearly exhausted. Laura went right to his side. Naruto. Are you okay? Naruto nodded, doing his best to speak through his pain. I've been worse than this before. Just get me to the X Mansion and give me a place to sit. I'll be back to normal before you know it. The X Mansion, Laura repeated, having almost forgotten in all the insanity. She looked towards the manor, her thoughts returning to the mission ahead. Fighting back tears, she said to Naruto, "Come on, let's go home. I swear, boy, one of these days you're gonna get yourself in a mess you can't get out of," Rogue told Naruto as they walked through the gardens of the Xavier Institute. Her southern drawl was as strong as ever, and she wore her classic green and white jumpsuit with brown jacket over top of it. Her hair was brunette with a white streak on top. Her eyes were emerald green and her lips were ruby red thanks to her lipstick. A beautiful creation that every man who'd ever met had fantasized about, and fantasizing was all they could ever do. One kiss, and Rogue's powers would kick in, sucking the life out of them. There was a damn good reason her curvaceous figure was covered from head to toe. Laura hadn't really noticed the beauty though. Even while she helped Naruto walk, her focus remained solely on the new home she was about to enter. The massive wood mansion had her as wide-eyed as a child on Christmas morning. This place is incredible. I can't believe this is going to be my new home. Yep, it's a wonder all right, Naruto groaned out, trying not to kill the moment. He looked up at Rogue, one of the X-Men he was most well acquainted with, and asked her, "Rogue, can you go get Logan for us? He's gonna wanna meet Laura." In case you hadn't guessed from what I said about her powers. Based on her powers, she's my kid, came a gruff voice just in front of them. Laura looked up with wide eyes to find a man walking towards her, a man who wore a simple pair of jeans, a white t-shirt, and brown coat over it. His hair was jet black, his face was covered in fuzz, and between his lips was the very end of a cigar. It was Logan, aka the one and only Wolverine, and he looked quite skeptical of his supposed spawn. He got right up in her face, sizing her up. "Rogue got a call last night, said a girl claiming to be my daughter was supposed to get here today. That you?" For the first time in the presence of her father, Laura had to fight just to remain calm. "Why yeah, my name's Laura." Logan sniffed the girl. Strange as that might have seemed, he narrowed his eyes and said, "You've got an adamantium skeleton. That not something I was born with." "Wasn't something I was born with either." A good response, although it implied she's been through a surgery just as painful as his had been. Logan thought for a couple more seconds, then asked, "Got anything that proves you're mine?" "Heh. I heard you weren't very trusting," Laura said with a smile. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a report from HYDRA, one that apparently detailed everything they'd done to create Laura. "This is the best I could get when I escaped. It's just a page, but it should be enough for you to get the idea." Taking the paper in his hand, Logan looked it over, then turned his gaze to Laura. She stood there with hitched breath, waiting for his response. Logan let out a small sigh and said, "I'll want a DNA test of my own, but I believe you." Laura's eyes lit up. "Really? That's—" Whoa, hold on a second," Logan interrupted. He was careful to be 100% clear about this next bit. "You're my daughter. I buy that. Doesn't mean we're gonna be buddy-buddy all of a sudden. Don't expect me to be out in the yard tossing a ball around with ya or anything. You got that?" "Yeah, totally," Laura responded quickly. She hadn't expected her father to accept her right away, not when she'd only just met him. "So, that means I can stay here, right?" Without hesitation, Logan replied, "Yeah, I know the professor wouldn't care. Taking in strays is kinda his thing. Might have to talk him to letting Naruto stay though. He's not always a fan of how the kid takes care of his business. He's saved my life more than once. Naruto's my friend, and I'll fight for him if I have to." Logan looked at Naruto, someone he'd come across more than once, and sniffed the air around him. He snarled at the young rider, "He's more than just your friend. I can smell it." Just like that, Logan's claws came out and he started walking towards Naruto. The blonde did his best to back away, but with his body still worn out, he tripped and fell backwards, with Rogue doing his best to catch. "Ah, shit. I gotcha," the Southern Belle told him as he fell into his arms. What she hadn't counted on was the way Naruto was throwing his arms around to try and steady himself. His bare hand brushed up against her face for at least a good second, making Rogue's heart stop. "Oh." Rogue's eyes shot shut, just waiting for the power of hellfire to come surging into her. But it never did. When she opened them a few seconds later, all she saw was her teammate walking towards her and Naruto, growling, "Look here, bub, I'll give you pass cause you didn't know she was my kid, but from here on out, you can consider her off limits. Might not have been a dad for long. But I know Laura isn't gonna be safe around you. You can stay for one night. My thanks for getting her home. And then you can go ahead and hightail it out of here." Before anyone could respond, Logan turned around and headed back towards the X-Mansion. Rogue let go of Naruto without thinking, her mind off in other places, and let the kid make the short drop to the ground. He was fine, at least from a physical perspective. Well, that could have gone better. "Least we know he gives a shit about me," Laura said with a shrug and a small smile. "You did it. You got me home. Thank you, Naruto. It was my pleasure. Now what do we do about me and your dad?" Laura really liked hearing Logan referred to as her dad. It didn't do anything to soften the blow of what came next though. "I guess we do what he said." Naruto's eyes went a little wide as she further explained, "It's not like you could really stick around when this was over anyways. The X-Men wouldn't let someone who attracts the kind of danger you do stay here for long. And I can't leave when I just found my family, honestly. I think this was how things were gonna have to go anyways." She was right, and Naruto knew it too, yet his heart didn't seem to care. All it knew was that someone it had really began care about was potentially leaving. Naruto tried to hide how the whole situation made him feel. "Yeah, totally, I got you to your family, and you can be with them now. That's all that really matters, right?" "Naruto." Laura was fighting back tears. She could see the pain on his face, the way he trying so hard not to make her feel guilty. It hurt her almost as much as it did him. "This isn't goodbye forever. I can talk to my dad, maybe even get him to come around on you. We could still be together, or at least try to be. You know that I like you, more than I've ever liked anyone, and I don't want you to not be in my life." Tears began to fall down Laura's cheeks. It was a sight Naruto couldn't bear to see. He stood up, walked through the pain and over to her, and pulled her face into his chest, whispering into his lover's ear, "I'll always be in your life, I swear, Laura. I don't forget about those precious to me. Maybe we can't be together right this second, but I'm not gonna forget about you. You'll see me again." Laura sniffed back some of her tears and nodded. She pulled her head from Naruto's chest and almost said something. But whatever it was, she didn't quite seem ready to say it yet. Naruto could only watch as she pushed him away and ran for the X-Mansion, leaving him alone. Rogue. Luckily, she was too off in her own little world to see Naruto fighting back his own tears. While he was busy trying to bottle things up, she sputtering the same phrase out over and over again. "He touched me. He can touch me." Naruto would have given anything for someone to just tell him what to do. Laura hurt him worse than Pierce's attack ever could have, but she hadn't meant to. Hell, hurting him seemed to hurt her right back. As much as Naruto wanted to be angry with her, he just couldn't. He knew this was out of either of their hands, even if that didn't make him feel any better. What was he supposed to do? Those thoughts were interrupted when Naruto heard a knock at his door. Day had turned to night by then, and he was staying at one of the guest rooms in the Xavier Institute. It was a simple room, with a wood floor, white walls, and bed with green sheets up against the wall, perfectly satisfactory for a single night. There was another knock at the door, so Naruto got up from his bed and walked over. He wasn't really in the mood for visitors, but couldn't come up with a good reason not to answer the door. "I'm coming," Naruto grumbled. He reached the door and opened it, expecting to see Professor X or maybe Cyclops here to wish him a good night and warn him not to do anything stupid while he was here. Instead he saw Rogue standing before him in her bathrobe. "Hey Rogue, what's up?" She stared at him, not saying a word. Naruto waited for a couple more seconds, then began to ask, "Rogue, are you feeling LMPH?" Rogue lunged at the young rider, latching her ruby lips onto his own. She kissed him for a few seconds, pulled away, then blinked a few times, processes what had just happened, without thinking. Rogue pushed Naruto forward, closing the door behind her. "It's true, you really can touch me. Something about you being a ghost rider means my powers don't work on you. Maybe it's because you can't suck the life out of something that already died. More to the point, you just kissed me." "I know I did, sugar," Rogue said with a blush. She untied her robe and let it fall down her shoulders, exposing her real outfit to Naruto. It was black, lace lingerie that barely contained her impressive bust. "I'm sorry about being this forward. It's just, well, I don't get many chances like this. And you're only here for one night. I can't let you go without at least trying to get some release." Now Naruto understood. Since Rogue couldn't touch anyone without sucking the life out of them, sex was a rare gift for her, even if she fought as hard as she could to control her powers. She couldn't muster up much more than a kiss, and her one night with Gambit had nearly killed him. Now she'd found someone who could hold her in his arms all night long, and she at least had to see if that was a proposition that interested him. Rogue walked up to Naruto, pulling him close to her. She felt a little ridiculous doing it, but she pushed her chest up against his, pulled their waists together, and whispered in the sexiest voice she could, "I'm asking you as a friend, Naruto, please, make love to me, make sweet, sweet love to me all night long." "Make love to you, eh?" Naruto repeated. This wasn't exactly what he'd been hoping for tonight. He didn't want another evening of meaningless, passionate sex. What he wanted was an honest-to-God relationship. Someone he could talk to the morning after and make plans for the day with over a nice breakfast he'd made for them. But he was frustrated, and he needed to work that out one way or another. If Rogue could get what she needed out of that too, even better. "I think I can manage that." Naruto kissed Rogue, intent on giving her exactly the kind of night she pined for. It wasn't love, it wasn't even all that romantic, but it felt good to help a friend and get some release. For tonight that would have to do. Hinata didn't know how much longer she could last. For the past few days she, Kiba, and Akamaru had been traveling south per Mephisto's orders, Kiba riding on the back of Hinata's motorcycle while Akamaru somehow got his own bike. Thus far they hadn't recruited anyone new, just returned a few lesser demons that had escaped from Mephisto's grasp, despite the easy fights. A new problem soon became apparent. The side effect of being a rider were almost overwhelming Hinata. She recognized what she needed to do. Despite her upbringing, she wasn't a stranger to self-servicing. She just rarely indulged in the act, and certainly wasn't going to allow her new powers to dictate her actions. As soon as the group checked into a hotel room, Hinata had drew the coldest bath imaginable before adding several buckets of ice. Thankfully, housing a demon meant immunity to hyperthermia. But that hadn't solved the woman's problem, as her libido refused to cool down. The writer honestly didn't know how long she'd been sitting in the bathtub, only that most of the ice had melted and the water had turned lukewarm. As she debated adding more water to the already almost overflowing tub, the bathroom door opened. "Kiba!" Hinata cried out as she used her hands to cover herself as much as possible. "Close the door before Akamaru sees." "Oh, relax." Kiba waved off her friend's concern. The little perv swiped the company card and decided to spend the night at the bar. "Hinata, we need to talk." "About what?" Hinata asked, uncovering her upper body. "Look, this isn't healthy for you. Holding everything in," Kiba explained before setting something on the toilet seat. Hinata just now realized Kiba had carried a laptop in with her. Although she raised an eyebrow, Kiba ignored it as she said, "Since Akamaru is enjoying your card, I figured it was only right that you enjoy a bit of his stuff. I've caught him using this thing a few times to look at porn. Not sure if he uses it for much else, honestly." Despite the situation, a small smile graced Hinata's lips as she softly chuckled. "No matter what species, Akamaru is still a horned dog. Tell me about it. I'm really surprised we didn't manage to breed him while he was still a dog." Kiba agreed before opening up the laptop. "But back to my point, you need to stop all this nonsense. Look up whatever you want. I won't ask and I won't judge. All I'm worried about is you feeling better." With a soft smile and a sly wink, Kiba exited the bathroom, closing the door on the way out. Left alone once more, Hinata thought over her friend's words before begrudgingly admitting she was right. With a sigh, the woman used the shower curtain to dry off her hands before twisting her body to face the computer. Opening up the web browser, she found the homepage to be a search engine, with some rather interesting suggestions. Deciding to ignore whatever Akamaru had searched, Hinata slowly typed in "blonde guy" and hit enter. In less than a second her screen was filled up with links to other websites. The writer didn't know where to start, until she saw the word images at the top of the screen. Rationalizing the word was just another way of say photo, the former heiress clicked on it. The words on screen soon being replaced with numerous images of blonde, smiling men. Hinata could feel herself getting warmer, but the pictures weren't quite right. Clicking back on the search bar, she amended the phrase to say blonde blue-eyed guy. Quickly the images changed to only featuring men she described, getting warmer still, but not quite there. Hinata tried blonde blue-eyed guy naked only to be confused when her search didn't return any images, only 2 sentences. What the heck is safe search? Hinata wondered as she clicked on the link to turn it off. She was rewarded for her curiosity. The images now lacked clothes and the men showing off their natural gifts. South close but so far away, Hinata made one last adjustment to her search. typing blonde blue-eyed guy naked well endowed. Even now, she couldn't help but type away with a bit of dignity. Hinata felt as if her lower body was on fire when the new images appeared, but held off from taking action when she noticed another detail. "What's a video?" the woman quietly wondered aloud, not recognizing the term. Clicking on the word caused the images to be replaced by large ones with titles, not seeing why this section was so special. Hinata clicked on a random image, only to gasp as the image increased in size to dominate the screen and began moving like a movie. "Oh sweet Cammy," the writer softly yelled before the need became too great, and she took action. Back in the hotel room, Kiba sat at the foot of one of the twin beds. Originally it was planned that the women would share a bed, but with Akamaru running off for the night that was no longer necessary. Her wayward brother was the furthest thing from Kiba's mind right now. Instead she was concerned for her friend, as she read the writer's handbook Mephisto had provided. Kiba gained a great understanding of what lied ahead for her wife. Eventually Hinata would get to the point that lust would take over and she'd seek out any random man to gain release. And, if Kiba's hunch was right, then be heartbroken when that man wasn't Naruto. Kiba prayed it wouldn't get to that point, and she soon discovered those prayers would be answered, although her enhanced hearing only caught a few muffled words and moans. Kiba's excellent sense of smell picked up the increased pheromones Hinata was putting off. Unfortunately, this triggered a domino effect. Gritting her teeth, the Inuzuka woman tried to hold off as long as possible before she couldn't stand it. Like Hinata, Kiba had been reining in her desires since arriving to this new world. Although much more willing in the activity, she'd been forced to stop thanks to the lack of privacy. Being alone in the room, with her brother gone for the night and her friend otherwise occupied, was the tipping point that sent Kiba over the edge, almost shredding her clothes as she took them off and threw them to the floor. A common occurrence since she slept in the buff. Kiba fell back onto the bed as she got to work, already knowing what set her off. She didn't need the laptop to help her. Instead she let her secret desires drive her actions, and not just the ones about a certain blonde. Release would come quickly, but not quick enough. She panicked when she heard the bathtub draining. Hopping under the blanket, the woman closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep as Hinata exited the bathroom, wearing only a towel and carrying the laptop. At seeing her friend seemingly asleep, the writer set the laptop on a nearby chair before giving a friendly kiss to Kiba's cheek, saying, "Thank you, Kiba, good night." As Hinata turned away to get her pajamas on, she was unaware that her friend had cracked open one of her eyes, a fire having been reignited. "Fuck, this is getting bad," Kiba thought as Hinata finished getting dressed and climbed into her own bed. "I've got to tell her, I just don't know how."